Hello, everyone. My guest today is Shri Vedveer Arya. He is a civil servant. He is a joint secretary and additional financial advisor with the Indian Defence Accounts Services (IDAS). He has a master's degree in Sanskrit from the University of Delhi. He is also a chronologist, historian, and author. He is the author of books such as The Chronology of India from Manu to Mahabharata, The Chronology of India from Mahabharata to the Medieval Era, and The Origin of the Christian Era, Fact or Fiction. So, Vedvirji, welcome to the podcast. It's great to finally get to talk to you.
Yeah, namaste Abhijit ji, and thank you for inviting me on your very prestigious show. You're, I think, doing wonderful job.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. It's great to have you. So, sir,
Thank you.
what is the so you have been writing about Indian chronology. You are
Yes,
revisiting Indian chronology a priori from a fresh perspective, not based on the accepted mainstream version of chronology, which I
yes,
also agree that has lots of problems. So,
yes,
I would like to ask you to begin with what are the
yes.
problems with the currently accepted chronology of Indian history?
Yeah, to begin with, I can say that I'm not anything invented and new, the chronology. Before the arrival of the colonial rulers, India had its own traditional chronology. Like if you see regarding Vikramaditya, we have a Vikram Samvat that commenced in 57 BC. Okay, till Britishers' arrival, nobody ever anybody has mentioned that 57 BC that epoch was not initiated or not established by the Vikramaditya. Modern historians say this epoch has nothing to do with Vikramaditya because Vikramaditya is the mythical personality. Okay, how we have started using this Vikrama era, a mythical person who never existed in the history. But when you read the textbooks, because before studying the history, the my strength is because I studied Sanskrit, so I have access to the original textbooks. So I read original textbook before reading the history. I started reading history only during the civil services because you have to. I just chose this subject to okay, let me take as one option. So that's why when I have read almost 20-25 books of various authors of ancient India, then I found that no one has ever read original textbooks. They just you can say they just copied whatever has been written by the colonial so-called historians and scholars. No original research, and 99.9% historians have no knowledge of Sanskrit, but still they are researching in the ancient India. It's a very surprising. So when I connected with the what chronology existed, like if you see the Vikramaditya and Kalidasa, they both were in the almost contemporaries, and even Kalidasa mentions that Vikramaditya is his sakha. Sakha means same age old friend. Okay, and Varahamihira was in their court. There are Navaratnas in the Vikramaditya. So now the historians, what they do, they just date Kalidasa much before the Varahamihira. The Chandragupta, the Gupta dynasty's king Chandragupta, he had a Vikramaditya title. So they say that, okay, even though there are references, so that Vikramaditya, because they can't deny the historicity of Kalidasa because so many written texts are available. So now Vikramaditya, then Chandragupta, Gupta dynasty exists because we have a lot of inscriptional evidence. So that's why Chandragupta is the Vikramaditya. So he was in his court. Chandragupta was almost 400 to 420, 430, 440 CE, AD, as per the modern chronologists, how they date it, modern historians. Now, Kalidasa has to be dated there, but Varahamihira, who is referring to Shaka of 427, so he can never be dated before 505 AD. And Amaraja, a person who wrote a commentary on text of Varahamihira, he mentioned that he died around 509 Shaka. That comes around 585. So Varahamihira can't be dated beyond 505 AD. Now there is a almost 100-year gap between Kalidasa and Varahamihira. If so, why Kalidasa is referring to Varahamihira, saying that he is my senior contemporary? Such a chronological inconsistency, nobody ever answered. The problem is We have traditionally dated that Vikramaditya, Kalidasa, and Varahamira were in the first century BC because 57 BCE was the epoch established by the Vikramaditya. Now the colonial historians questioned us. If Vikramaditya, Kalidasa both existed in the first century BC and you are using the 57 BC, there are thousands of inscriptions dated, even the books dated in Vikrama Samvat. Everybody refers to 57 BC. Okay. If so, then why Kalidasa is referring to Shaka 445 and Varahamira is referring to Shaka 427 in their books? And you say that Shaka era commenced in 78 AD. A person who is referring to the epoch of 78 AD, how can you date him at least 100 years before the particular that epoch commenced it? So we had no answer. Then we started rejecting the all maybe some errors or prakshipt. I don't know what kind of they say interpolations or I don't know. Even they said that Indians had no knowledge of, no sense of chronology, no sense of history. This kind of useless narratives have been fed into the system. Actually, there was an ancient epoch of Shakaira existed. That epoch has been reset by the Indian astronomers in 78 AD. 78 AD is an astronomical epoch, not an epoch established by any Shaka king. Shakas actually started an epoch much before the first century BC. So this the reference by the Kalidasa and the Varahamira. Not only that, Kalidasa says in the Jyotir Vidabharanam that I am writing this book in 3068 Kali Yuga. If you calculate 3101 BC onwards, 3068, it is about 33 BC. That also perfectly matches that Kalidasa himself is giving a date that I am writing this book on a so and so date. But he is referring to Shaka 445. So there is a contradictory. What these funny historians? So these guys, what they know, Jyotirvidabharanam is also a forgery. A person lived in 12th century. He wrote in the name of Kalidasa. I don't know in the world. Nobody ever wrote a book in the name of somebody else in the history. I don't know whether I write a book in the name of Shakespeare, it will be acceptable. So all these nonsensical theories have been floated because these historians are just doubting Thomases. एक doubting Thomas होता है Christian में, so he keeps on doubting everything. So similarly, the modern historians are just doubting Thomases, but they have a blind faith in the colonial rulers and colonial historians. Whatever they wrote, that is authentic. Rest everything you have to doubt. Since historians have a doubt, so no, you keep on saying that fellow will never agree with you because he's not a researcher, he's simply doubting. So modern historians have a blind faith, a kind of a faithful historians in the colonial, whatever the chronological history has been reconstructed last 200 years. And see, they just reject every evidence since they have a doubt. So this is
What's
the basic
interesting?
problem with that.
What's interesting is that when it comes to Egyptology, Egyptian chronology, when they come
Yes.
up with new discoveries, they revise the dates of various dynasties and all that based on the
Yes.
evidence that is at hand. And the research is done in a very scientific manner. But when it comes to India, the colonial dates are set in stone. They are enshrined in our ethos, and we can never question them. I simply don't understand what is wrong with the contemporary Indian historians. And like you mentioned, most of them don't even know Sanskrit. How can you even be a historian in India without knowing
Yes.
Sanskrit? Why don't we have these standards?
Yes, there is a. If any historian who want to have a study ancient Indian history, or a person who want to do research in the ancient Indian history, he must have a knowledge of Sanskrit, Prakrit,
Yes,
and Pali languages because you can
yes,
read the original inscriptions. You need not just read the what are the how the inscriptions have been translated during the colonial era. They just skip something or abridged translations or even the distorted translations. And if you don't know the original don't have an access or you don't have a ability to read the original sources, you cannot be a researcher. You simply follow the narrative. So that's why I always say that the modern historians are just cheerleaders of the colonial historians.
absolutely,
They are
absolutely.
not the researchers at all. You tell me, like, let us take a Romila Thapar. You read all what is her contribution? just building the same narrative in a different language, means a different English, maybe, which is more. She is a she is a scholar in English literature, not history. So she only wrote Indian history in English literature, it appears. What we can,
Right.
maybe a little funny to say, but what her contribution, what actually she has discovered something which was not known to during the colonial era, what actually the way they wrote the Indian history, nothing. What her contribution? But she got an award from some 1 million award from some US evangelical society, maybe in the disguise of some other name. And Infosys, the software guy, he has no idea of history, so he thought he has to promote some Indian historians, so they bought only this Nayan Jot Lahari or Romila Thapar, so they also gave an award. Then awardee is having some kind of a stamp over it, so people keep on
Hmm.
following them, that oh, they are the scholars, and a person, even you talk something more better, sensible, or based on the evidence, you may not be given that kind of any priority. The biggest problem is in the modern history, not only in the entire world, history is just a narrative. Nobody
Yes.
is teaching the chronology, because the timeline is very, very important. That is the basic structure, even foundation of the history. If your chronology is wrong, your narrative will go wrong. The problem is we lost a chronology beyond Buddha. We have been just, Buddha has been dated somewhere 500 BCE. Now they say that every entire Indian history has to be dated, and another 1,000 years
Hmm.
before that, they wrap up entire so-called Brahmanical literature. Any Sanskrit is a Brahmanical literature. I don't know
Hmm.
why it is a, why English literature is not a Pope literature. Why only Indian? Huh? It's Sanskrit is related to every Indian. What only they spoke, and this kind of a division and kind of a false narrative has been actually propagated by the colonial historians. The real research is yet to begin. I think there is a need to renaissance of Indian history is required. That can happen only through chronology, because as per our traditional history, even you, okay, forget about the Yugas and Tamilians, their history, they say that Agastya lived somewhere 11,000 BC.
Hmm.
Okay, why not? We reinvented. I have established based on the archaeoastronomical, because
Hmm.
archaeology cannot give you chronology. It can only be a supporting evidence. Even suppose
Yes.
you have excavated a particular site, you can only explain what has been found in that place. Okay, but what you will find in the ancient civilization, even even before the modern era, a kind of a stability was there, because your technology, whatever is, that was the a particular stage it has achieved. So everywhere, if you even do the some excavation, you find some pot sheds maximum.
Yes.
Same thing has been found. Then they started that some kind of painted gray ware, and I don't know what kind of these colonial archaeologists, they developed a toolkit. The toolkit was there. Okay, if you find painted graver, this has to be dated somewhere 500 BC or 600 BC. If it is some copper culture or something, then you have to date somewhere 1000. Then they come out of this nonsensical idea of dating the eras or epochs based on a metal. Suppose the bronze era, then
Yes.
iron age, and this. I don't
Hmm.
know why human being has to sequentially invent the metals. Is there some kind of a science? The ह्यूमन बीइंग कैन ओनली फर्स्ट आइडेंटिफाई कॉपर और, फिर उसके बाद ही उसको आयरन और पता लगेगा, उससे पहले ही कांट लर्न द आयरन और. Why can't both? He can iron ore is metallic ore. You can find the iron is available, copper is also. Human being can learn both. The problem was the iron rust. This was the reason ancient civilization preferred copper. But stating that they don't know iron, iron was known to later stages. Since Rigveda and other texts have the iron references, so it has to be dated only much, much later when copper age ended. So these
Right.
are just speculations about the ancient history. I have never understood why a person who knows melting copper, he can't melt the iron.
Correct.
So all these are speculative or nonsensical ideas. Why not we reconstruct the chronology? Let us validate our traditional chronology. So when I started validating the Indian, because it
Hmm.
was a almost impossible task for me, because it is a well known that Shaka era started 78. This was
Hmm.
my beginning, because that troubled me a lot. A Kalidasa who is writing a book, Jyotirvidhabaranam, that is also a book on astronomy, and he says that I am writing in 33 BC, and these idiot historians say that don't believe this book is a forgery. So that actually kept on troubling me for almost a decade. Then I started, okay, let me read the inscriptions and other. Then I found that numerous astronomical references given in inscription, like solar eclipses, lunar eclipses, even weekdays, can't be reconciled with the, because once a date given, you have to establish an absolute date in the history. But we are repeatedly failing to, okay, even let us forget about the weekday, but at least eclipses. Now, then, based on the various algorithms, almost we can go back to 5,000 years back. We can calculate exact eclipse date also now. But we failed to establish. Then I found one copper plate, Kurtakoti, that refers to a total solar eclipse. Not only the eclipse, he gives the exact date, time, and he says that around noon time that eclipse ended, and the king took bath and then make the donation to the some learned people. Now they say that Indians celebrated some eclipses which were not visible. I don't know if I start celebrating that today solar eclipse somewhere occurred in South America, but I'm celebrating him. People will laugh at me. Kare, what kind of a person? Or even so, this is totally a nonsense. When I started reconciling it, then I found that in the northern Karnataka, the total solar eclipse occurred only once in 53 BC. That is 9th May 53 BCC, the total solar eclipse. But if you date, because that refers to 530 Shaka, 530 plus 78, it comes around 610 or somewhere 608. 6088, 7th century, no such solar eclipse occurred in India.
Hmm.
So now they say that this copper plate is a forgery. Now these epigraphists or archaeologists, they rejected more than 200, 300 inscriptions as a forgery. Then I started that let me read only forged inscriptions. This is how said. Then I found that it is not a forgery. There is an error in the chronology. Once you correct the chronology, every data is correct. And this is the way
Hmm.
you will do the scientific investigation. If you have a data point, suppose you have 100 data point, but your model is able to explain only 50 and it is rejecting 50, something is wrong in your model. Not don't
Exactly.
blame the data. Don't
Yes.
blame the data. But these idiots, historians, they just blame the data and reject it. And even today, since they're following the same toolkit given by the colonial historians, our epigraphists, they keep on rejecting this is the forgery. Recently, just two copper plates have been found in Pranaveshwara Mandir. One they have accepted, other one they rejected, because that refers to 500 Shaka, another refers to 1100 Shaka. They said how it is possible, both are in the same script. They both appears to be contemporary. How can one is referring to 520 Shaka, another is referring to the almost 1100 Shaka? There is a gap of more than 680 years between both of them. Then they rejected one 500, whatever is a little earlier, they reject it as a forgery. Then I say both can be contemporary. One is referring to a later Shaka, one is referring to the ancient Shaka era. So both Shaka eras existed. So based on this, I have established the epoch of an ancient Shaka, that is 583 BC. So now I found that somewhere after 900 or 1000 AD, 1000 years back, we just lost a track of the ancient Shaka epoch. Since we were using the calendar of 78 AD more rigorously, because that is astronomically more correct. So that led to an illusion that there was maybe only one Shaka, that is 78 AD, but we never questioned our chronology. Astronomically we started following Shakaira 78, because every day we were, for the rituals as well as the marriages, I don't know, social ceremonies, every time you refer to a calendar in India, because Indians followed astronomical calendar since
Hmm.
Vedic era. So that's why
Yes.
70 80, even in the south, Shaka means it is a synonymous to era. It's not
Hmm.
anything some it is only referred to Shaka era. Any, even they call it Christu Shaka, they call it. It means
Mhm.
Christian Shaka. It is not a it is actually the Christian era. The era is
Uh-huh.
synonymous to Shaka. So Shaka became
Okay.
so much popular in South India. So they just refer to 78 AD as a Shaka.
I see.
This led to an illusion that probably only 78, because they already forgot on the ancient Shaka epoch. So in astronomically, they said that it is the 78 AD is the only Shaka. But they never ever, nobody has questioned that Varahamihira and Kalidasa were not in the court of Vikramaditya, and Vikramaditya lived in the 1st century BC, and 57th BC epoch existed. Now, when foreigners, means the European historians, landed, then say, okay, you say that Shakaira started in 78 AD. I said, yes. Then how can be a Kalidasa Varahamihira who is referring to Shakaira can live in the 1st century BC, at least 100 years before the 78 AD? Then we had no answer. Then they said, no, 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 you have no idea. You people are just, your all traditions are wrong. Now we will teach you how to do the research. This is how the contemporary Indian Council of Historical Research. But I don't know, the research has nothing, there is no research presently. They're just following the whatever the colonial narrative has been written, and same thing they are following, and in the same line. So this first error, there is a 660-year chronological error. Now what we have to do, there are more than 10 to 15,000 inscriptions are dated in Shaka. We have to segregate into two categories. How many inscriptions are referring to ancient Shaka and how many inscriptions are referring to the later Shaka? Once you reconcile it, every inscription dated in Shaka is authentic. But if we follow only 70-80, we land up rejecting more than hundreds or 500 inscriptions as a forgery first. Second, we are repeatedly failing to explain the dates, the eclipse dates, and even weekdays, and we are repeatedly failing. There is something seriously wrong. So there is a need to. This is the reason what I went into investigating the all rejected inscriptions. And you will be more surprised when I found in the Vijayanagara inscriptions also, there are more than 30 inscriptions I found are dated beyond 14th century. And modern historians say that the Vijayanagara established only 1338 or somewhere 1338 AD. But more than 30 inscriptions are dated prior to that. And even the earliest is dated in somewhere 10th or 11th century.
I see.
Then how a Vijayanagara existed around 10? There is a chronological error of 660, but it is not so easy. In the chronology is like a big jigsaw puzzle. Indian chronology, specifically because due to Buddha and various other factors like Greek history also with Alexander, if I change date of even a particular king, then I will land up reconciling the entire world chronology. Due to this, nobody touches the chronology, modern historian, because it's a big jigsaw puzzle. Somehow they have haphazardly arranged it. Last 200 years, everybody says this is the one. If I'm disturbing that, the onus is on me to tell entire. This led to me writing not only the Indian chronology, then I wrote the book, The Origin of the Christian Era, where I have established that it is not only in Indian chronology, the error of 660 year exists. It's actually, we are the entire world chronology, last 300, 400 years, we are blindly following that first AD as the Jesus birth. I'm not saying that Jesus was a historical or mythical, that is a different issue. My problem is there is a date given that a particular person called Jesus born 42nd year of the Augustus. Augustus is not a mythical person. He was a king. You have unke coins bhi hai, some a lot of evidence is available. So what you will do, you have to Augustus date is has to be fixed. So that's why these historians, European historians, after Lightfoot, even James Ussher, actually they started the biblical chronology. Prior to that, every civilization has their own chronology. Like Greece has their own chronology based on the this Olympiad era. Even the Ptolemy gives the chronology of Achaemenid Empire, beginning from the Nabonassar of the Babylon. So various eras exist because Christian era never existed that time. The problem is around 1600 to 1700 AD, the Christian historians, they just fixed first AD as the Jesus birth. Then they started reconciling the chronology backwards. I said, this is the problem with you because you have selected a wrong sheet anchor. This is the reason every date has to be corrected. And there is a huge mess in the second millennium BC. They have not, till date, they could not establish an absolute chronology for the Hammurabi dynasty,
Mhm.
the first dynasty of Babylon. This is the biggest problem, chronological problem. They keep on researching their, till date, they could not solve. If last 300 400 years we struggled and we could not solve the problem of the second millennium BC and the chronology of the Hammurabi, I don't think we are able to solve this problem in next 3000 years also. Why? Because we are
Right.
the wrong sheet anchor. Then when I investigated the Western chronology, even Egyptian chronology also, then there are a lot of archaeoastronomical evidences. Based on that, when I reconciling their chronology, then I found that there is a chronological error of identical error of 660.
I see.
Okay,
Mhm.
this is this problem actually how this problem cropped in the Western chronologies. After when Western Church became weak and the Eastern Church took over, like a Byzantine Empire.
Yes.
During the Byzantine Empire, the Syrian Church became more powerful. So this the Syrian Church, there is a Severus Siboth. He's the actually Archbishop of a one Syrian Church. They actually used to refer to Indian Shaka calendar for fixing the Easter date. So since our Shaka calendar after 900 and or 1000 AD, we started following the 78 AD Shaka. So same Shaka calendar also they started following. Then they fixed the date of the Jesus birth also considering our Shaka calendar.
Okay.
So the way the 660-year problem is in India, the same problem cropped in the Christian chronology. So this is the reason Abul Fazl in his book Aine Akbari, he says that some Christians follow that Jesus was born when winter solstice was in the 8th or 9th degree of the Capricorn, where some others say that no, Jesus was born when the uh, winter solstice is to occur in the first degree of the winter solstice. There is a difference of 8 to 9 degrees. Okay.
Mhm.
Due to precession, you add each degree 72 years, it leads up to 640 years or something. So there was a
Right.
difference opinion about the when Jesus was born. Why so? So this is the real problem. The Syrian Christians, because they generally Indian astronomy was so popular in the West before the birth of the Christian history.
Mhm.
They even the Severus Sibokti challenged the Greek astronomers. Written records are available. He says that Indians are better astronomers than the Greeks. Don't think that you speak Greek. That's why you are a more learned people than the other even Syrians or Babylonians and the Indian astronomers.
Mhm.
He challenged them. Then the record is there that clearly establishes that the first AD, the date fixed by the this 16th or 17th century by the Usher and Lightfoot, they simply followed that erroneous date of the Jesus birth.
Mhm.
Actually, Jesus date has to be actually we have to fix him 660 year backwards. Means somewhere around 660 BC, not first AD.
So how do we reconcile that with Augustus?
Yeah, that the Augustus also, how you have fixed the Augustus date? Since you started first day, you said okay, 42 years, so you go back to 42 year and then fix the Augustus day. This chronology is called circular reasoning. If you ask somebody when a father was born, you can say that oh, 30 years before his son, or when the son was born, 30 years later than his father. You can't have a chronology. So then what you do, you finally fix a particular either father's date or son's date and then start fixing a particular date. This is the problem with the modern chronologists. You just go to Google and search why first AD is an historical epoch. Till date, not a single article has been published because all European historians after 1600 BCE, they're all faithfuls. From the childhood, they started following the Christian era first AD, so they never thought that this can be wrong.
Mhm.
So this is how they started following a wrong epoch of Jesus' birth, and they started chronology. Now you have to reconcile this. The problem why I am referring to, due to this, now I have no other option to fix the Alexander date 322 years before the Jesus birth. So now 322 to 23 is the Alexander date, and Alexander came up to the Afghanistan and somewhere in the Pakistan. He came there. No, that can't be denied. That is an historical fact. But we never referred it was a very, very minor incident for India.
Minor
It's
event.
very
Yes.
minor incident. But he came. His date is important. Not only that, there are so many Indo-Greek coins have been found in the Afghanistan and Pakistan area. Now that has to be dated, even for the paleologically, and even because those coins have even Brahmi script as well as the Greek script. When you investigate into this, you will find, you just read the Anabasis of Alexander written by Arin. This guy is actually referring that when Alexander landed in Afghanistan, already Greek civilization existed. Even he went to some temple of Yathana and he offered a sacrifice there. How Greek civilization existed in the group before the arrival of the Alexander, but modern textbook just teaches that all Indo-Greek kings are Greek civilization only came only along with the Alexander.
Hmm.
So there is a problem. When I investigated into the Greek literature, it is written that prior to the Alexander, there was an Hercules, who lived some 70 years or 80 years before the Trojan War, as per the Greece chronology. He actually invaded up to Afghanistan. There is a one area, a particular Aloras or some. I am just not able to recollect. He's mentioning in a particular area, saying that Hercules came up to this. Means he conquered the somewhere near to Kabul or some closer to Kabul, where Hercules came and conquered the from Macedonian, means Macedonia to up to Afghanistan.
Hmm.
Okay. And he says that Alexander was the first Greek who actually crossed that particular landmark also, because he even
I see.
entered to Takshashila and come to Rawalpindi area, where the
Hmm.
Herculean could not come to this. So when Hercules conquered this area, he actually appointed the Greek governors there. And
Hmm.
gradually they became independent and came to be known as the Indo-Greek kings. This is the reason the Milinda Panno, the Milinda Menander, lived
Even.
500 years after Buddha, where Alexander came much later in India.
Hmm.
Not only that, the Ashokan inscription refers to four or five Greek kings: Alika Sundara, Maga. There are names of four or five. They were
I see.
actually the governors of the Herculean who appointed them there. What
Hmm.
we think that since Ashoka is referring to the Greek governors there, even it is mentioned of Antiochus and others, so they have
Yeah.
to be dated around 3rd century BC. So this is the bedrock of Indian chronology, what the modern historians claim it. So Ashoka
Hmm.
can't be moved beyond 300 BC. But
Hmm.
our traditional chronology says Mahapadmananda, he became the king of Magadha after 1500 years of Mahabharata war. If you start
Okay.
Mahabharata war date somewhere 32nd century BC, somewhere 1600, 1700 is the time of the Nandas. After Nandas, Mauryan, Chandragupta Maurya became king. So somewhere 1600 BC or 1596 BC, what I have fixed, Chandragupta Maurya's coronation. So now, how do you reconcile the date of the Ashoka?
Hmm.
This is the question, and Ashokan inscriptions are clearly referring to the Indo-Greek kings.
Hmm.
So Indo-Greek kings existed much before the arrival of Alexander.
So how do we
So,
fix the date of the Mahabharata? That is the actually the main question here.
no, first what we need to do, because if you go beyond Buddha,
Hmm.
we have only literary evidences. Okay,
Yes. Yes. Hmm.
so we have to address the chronological problem two parts. First,
Hmm.
because up to Buddha, you have all epigraphic evidences, literary evidences, because what happens, you can revalidate based on a one particular data. Epigraphic evidence, once we correct this one Shakaira, based on that epigraphic evidence clearly suggests there was two different Shakaira, 660 years problem has been solved. There
Hmm.
are certain inscriptions found in Sri Lanka and Burma. They
Hmm.
refer to Shaka and Buddha Dhamma. The difference between these two was almost 1200 years.
I see.
1182 years. So what modern historians say, no, 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 they are not referring to Shaka. They have introduced an epoch in 638 AD, and they refer to that as a Shaka. Why a Burmese will refer this as a Shaka? There was no Shaka existed in Burma at all. They have no relation with the Shaka. Shakas only existed in. Why they call their epoch as a Shaka? It has nothing to do. They are actually referring to our ancient Shaka 583 BC, and they are saying 1182 years is the difference between Buddha Dhamma and the Shaka. Based on that, what can you can easily establish the chronology that the Theravada Buddhism, because Theravada Buddhism was born in the second Buddhist council, when 100 years have been elapsed from the Buddha Nirvana. So generally Theravadins used to blame Mahasangika, saying that you are not the original Buddha Dhamma, we were the original Buddha Dhamma. And Sri Lankans, and they follow the Theravada Buddhism, they followed an epoch after 100 years of Buddha. So this is the problem between that short chronology and long chronology. Like Buddhist sources, especially the all North Indian Mahasangika sources clearly refer that Ashoka lived 100 years after Buddha Nirvana. Okay. But Theravada Buddhist and this Mahavansha, Deepavansha of Sri Lanka, even Shasana Vansha of Burma, in Burma, the Theravada Pali literature. This literature refers to that Ashoka somewhere 218 years after Buddha Nirvana. So modern historians segregate these data points into two categories. The Buddhist sources refer to 100 years that Ashoka's coronation 100 years after Buddha Nirvana, and they come out of another set of data points like Mahavansha, Deepavansha. They refer to 218 years after Buddha Nirvana. How to reconcile the both? When I found that the same Theravada Buddhist and others, they refer to two different Ashokas. There was a Bimbisara dynasty, that Bimbisara, then Ajatashatru, because Buddha attained Nirvana in the 8th regnal year of Ajatashatru. In his chronology, there was a Kala Ashoka. Kala Ashoka even referred in the Theravada Buddhists, and they refer that he was the person who was ruling over India around 100 years after Buddha.
I see.
Where Maurya Ashoka, he lived from the Theravada Buddhists to 216 years. And he was the person having that Mahinda Sanghamitra were the sons of the Maurya Ashoka, not that Kala Ashoka. So the person, the numerous inscriptions of all the major rock edicts and the major Ashokan inscriptions were actually to be attributed to the Kala Ashoka, not Maurya Ashoka. Maurya Ashoka, he actually sent missionaries to the all over India and even the western countries and as well as the eastern countries. So he patronized the Theravada Buddhism, Maurya Ashoka. So these two, once you differentiate between these two Ashokas, you can easily explain both. Short chronology is also correct and long chronology. Long chronology is referring to Maurya Ashoka, where the short chronology is referring to Kala Ashoka. There is nothing wrong in the literary evidence. The problem is if you merge both together, then you will land up in a chronological problem also. Even you can easily establish our Adi Shankaracharya's date. Traditionally, it was in the 6th century BC. And he is referring to Dingnaga and Dharmakirti. And Vasubandhu lived 1000 years later, Buddha Nirvana. So then there is a difference of at least 1200 to 1300 years between Buddha and Adi Shankaracharya.
Yes.
Since modern historians brought forward the Buddha's date around 500 BC, so that's why the modern historians have no other option to shift Adi Shankaracharya 1300 years later, somewhere 788, 800 AD. But tradition says that he lived in the 6th century BC. The problem is twofold. First is the Shakanta era. These two, since we erroneously mixed up, due to that, an error of 660 years has been occurred in the Indian chronology. That is the first stage. Second problem, why because when I say 1300 years error in the in dating of Buddha, Jain historians, somewhere Hemachandra and later, Jain historians started identifying it Chandragupta because they had that fifth Kevalin. He was the Bhadrabahu. Okay, the Bhadrabahu had a disciple of one king called Chandragupta, and he
Hmm.
became Jain monk, and he adopted the name of Vishakhacharya. Then Bhadrabahu and this Chandragupta and Vishakhacharya, they just went to southwards and
Hmm.
set up they actually started doing the tapasya in somewhere near to Shravanabelgola. So there
Hmm.
you find the Bhadrabahu's Gufa, I mean the cave of Bhadrabahu, as well as the
Yes.
cave of Chandragupta is still existing.
Yes.
And Chandragupta died with the Sallekhana. Sallekhana means you simply you don't eat and everything, and then finally you die.
Yes.
So this is the history. Then said, no, this Chandragupta, they since only one Chandragupta was famous in India, Maurya Chandragupta. So these Jain historians, they just linked with the Chandragupta Maurya.
Right.
And we never questioned because we are not interested. Okay, maybe Chandragupta Maurya became a disciple of Bhadrabahu. But actually,
Hmm.
entire Jain literature, even the Karnataka literature, they are referring to Ujjain king Chandragupta, not Pataliputra king Chandragupta first. Okay. Ujjain king Chandragupta was he belonged to only Gupta dynasty of Malava.
Right.
Even
Right.
Karnataka literature refers to Guptanvaya Chandragupta, where the Maurya Chandragupta would not belong to Guptanvaya, not Gupta dynasty. He belonged to Maurya dynasty.
Hmm.
The
Hmm.
problem due to this, the Buddha Mahavira became contemporaries.
Right.
So Buddha's date has been brought forward by another 60 years, 670 years or 700 years. These two errors, once you correct these two errors, entire traditional chronology is correct. Now, when I reconcile with the world, now I have no other option to counter that bloody Christian era. I have
Right.
nothing to do. My Indian chronology has nothing to do with the. But since last 400 years, they started reconciling the world chronology. Then I have to reconcile the world chronology because Buddha is linked to Sri Lanka also. Now, if I say there is
Hmm.
an error in dating the 1300 years, then Sri Lankan chronology also to be antedated by 1300 years. Same thing I
Yes.
reconcile with the Tamil chronology because Tamil chronology and Sri Lankan chronology is interlinked.
Hmm.
Okay. So this is the same problem there also due to the Buddha Sangam era. The third Sangam era ended around 1300 BC, but modern
Hmm.
historians date somewhere first century or first century BC at all. There is another problem. 1200 years, the Tamil chronology also has been brought forward. Similarly, they brought forward the Sri Lankan chronology also. Since Sri Lankan and
Hmm.
Burmese chronology interlinked, they just brought forward another 1200 years. Same problem
Hmm.
occurred with the Tibetan chronology, and that is linked with the Chinese chronology because China and Tibet chronology is also interlinked. Now, China, when you touch the China is actually interlinked with the Persia also because Mongolians attacked them and they ruled over them. Now, once you touch the Persia, you now will touch the entire world Western chronology.
Greece. Yeah.
So it's not so simple. You simply say that no, I will
It's
date
not
my
simple.
Buddha somewhere 1300. I don't bother about your chronology. That is not correct. So this is the reason.
Hmm.
All because I am not the first person who is working on the Indian traditional chronology. Numerous personalities are working last 200 years. They repeatedly fail to answer. Once you date the Alexander 322, you will mess up entire Indian chronology.
Hmm. Right.
And we had no answer that Ashoka is referring to Indo-Greek kings. Indo-Greek kings came only after Alexander. This is another myth has been propagated last 200 years. So when I
Right.
investigate into the original chronology, what I say, there was a Sandrocotus. Sandrocotus means Chandragupta, I agree. But he was a
Yes.
Chandragupta Maurya or Chandragupta of Gupta dynasty or a
Hmm.
Naga. There was many Chandraguptas in the Naga dynasty also. Now, first of all, we should not do this kind of an identification, it's like kind of a random identification. First, fix the chronology of the Greek chronology, independent of Christian chronology. Don't mix up the Christian chronology with the
Yes.
Greek chronology. First. And then you establish Indian traditional chronology. Then you find out who is contemporary of whom. Don't
Hmm.
just establish a mistaken chronology and then reject entire traditional chronology. This is the wrong methodology. And another interesting fact is we have been repeatedly taught that Greek historians Megasthenes and I don't know what not, they all refer to Sandrocotus. He was the Chandragupta
Yes.
Maurya and Ashoka and everything. But same Greek historians, they are writing repeatedly that India has a chronology of 6,400 years and they had a
Yes.
genealogy of 153 kings and Sandra Kotak was the 153rd king, but they reject
Hmm.
that as a mythology. Now you see.
Selective reasoning, yes.
If same historians, they're saying that India has a genealogy and chronology of 600 and 400 years, 6451 years, if we say exactly, again, Megasthenes mentions.
Hmm.
And before Alexander. So India had a chronology
Hmm.
of at least 7th millennium or even beginning of 7000 BC onward, as per the what Greek historians are then. And they say that the first king of so-called, he was actually contemporary of Dionysus, another of the Greek king. So
Hmm.
Greek and India had a traditional chronology of more than 7,000 years, as per the historians contemporary, or 100 years plus minus with Alexander date. And you say
Hmm.
that no, don't believe them, but do you believe this idiot William Jones, who has established that Sandrocotus is the Chandragupta Maurya, but he is either silent or suppressed that the same Megasthenes is mentioning that 153 kings and 604 6,451 years of Indian genealogical history, everything has been erased.
Yes, it has.
But the problem is we have to establish the chronology, because traditionally Mahabharata we have dated around 32nd century BC. Okay. First, if we address the Buddha's date, because
Hmm.
Buddha lived before Nanda,
Yes.
so at least 200 years. So then when you see the Mahabharata and Buddha, difference is hardly 1200 years. Once you
Hmm.
correct the Buddha's traditional chronology, the problem is we should not date any event in isolation, because
Yes.
Mahabharata onwards we have continuous chronology. We have all Puranas. They mention that Mahapadmananda, he became king of Magadha either 1050 somewhere, no, but Panchashat and Panchashata in Sanskrit. If you say Panchashat, it is 50. If you say Panchashata, it means 500. So probably kind of some scribble error, or a person who is copying, he made an error that led to a Panchashat. So Panchashat 50, so somewhere generally the people started reading that probably the Mahapadmananda became the king of Magadha 1050 years after Mahabharata. When you reconcile the Buddhist Jainese sources along with the Puranic sources, then you find that there is an error of Mahapadmananda has to be dated 1500 years after after Mahabharata.
Mahabharata.
So
Hmm.
based on that, it is crystal clear that Buddha and Mahabharata, the difference between the chronological difference between these two events, Mahabharata, they generally call it Parikshita Janma, the birth of Parikshit, because he was born
Hmm.
just after Mahabharata war. The birth of Parikshit and the birth of Buddha, the difference of 1200 years that much is only explainable because the genealogy available. You can't date prior to that Mahabharata. Okay.
Right.
So then genealogy is perfectly available in all Puranas, and based on that, you can every year you can't even mess up with the 10, 20 years also. Such tight chronology is existing, and we have to reconcile the Buddhist and Jain sources also, not just
Hmm.
Puranas also, because Puranas
Yes. Yes. Of
generally
course.
ignore the Buddhist and Jain sources. They just give the kings who patronize the normal, the traditional Hinduism or whatever the Vedic tradition or those traditions. Similarly,
Hmm.
Jain and Buddhist, they just ignore the Hindu kings. So I don't want to use the word because they were also Hindus, only part of it.
Of course, there are Hindus.
Only
Yes.
the kind of a philosophy, because we had a different schools of philosophies.
Yes.
But Buddhism, Jainism became little hostile to the others, because we had a six schools of philosophies, never had any conflict. But
Yes.
after Buddhism, Jainism, actually there was a conflict. It is more intellectual conflict, not a kind of any
Not
religion,
a physical
different
violence only. Yeah.
religions. Huh? Never.
Hmm.
No, it was
Hmm.
there. I generally used to avoid the Buddhist or something, and Buddhists used to avoid me. This happens even today. Two great
Yes.
professors don't look at each other, so this happens.
Yes.
But don't say that it's some kind of they were actually killed each other. That never happened.
Yes.
So India, it was mostly the kings generally played a neutral role. They
Hmm.
say it's okay. I will organize a shastrata. Whoever wins, I have to honor that guy. So this
Yes.
happened. So then the king started patronizing the both. They patronized Buddhism also. They actually respected each other. So this always existed. only during the Pushyamitra Shunga's time there was some different, because there are references in Buddhist sources also, like Pushyamitra Shunga persecuted Buddhists. Actually, at that time, Yavanas means that Indo-Greek kings used to attack Saketa, and it is clearly mentioned
Hmm.
by Patanjali, the Mahabhashya. The Patanjali's Mahabhashya. The reference is that uh, Yavanas attacked Saketa, means
Hmm.
Ayodhya, as well as
Hmm.
they attacked the Madhyamika, that is Chittorgarh.
Hmm.
So they actually destroyed few cities, and they have even captured up to Magadha. At that time, the Pushyamitra Shunga, he actually countered them, and he
Hmm.
restricted them that they cannot cross Sindhu Nadi, the Agnimitra. This is the reason why Kalidasa's Malavika Agnimitram, the son of Pushyamitra, he played major role containing the power of the Yavanas.
Okay. Hmm.
They cannot cross the Indus River. But
Hmm.
during that time, when Yavanas used to attack, since they have adopted the Buddhism, the Buddhists used to support them. So it was no political war. This
It's a
was the
political thing.
reason
Yeah.
the
Hmm.
Pushyamitra Shunga had no other option to take a very strict action, those
Hmm.
supporting the Yavanas. But this has been
Right.
given like a religious color by the modern historians.
But the
They're
modern
saying that
historians, of
no, no, no,
course.
like Hinduism persecuted, or not Hinduism. Buddhist existed. Buddhists actually they faced persecution due to Islamic invasion. Otherwise, Buddhism was
Yes.
flourishing. Nalanda was flourishing. Vikramashila was flourishing. Even entire Takshashila, everything was flourishing.
Yes.
It's
So
actually
what's
Islamic
the so
invasion.
yes, I agree. Yeah.
Huh.
So what's the chronology that you have established from the Vedic age until Emperor
Yes,
Vikramaditya?
yes, yes. First, I have solved this problem with this the chronology I just explained up to
Hmm.
Buddha. There is a
Yes.
1380 gap between what modern historians did. Buddha attained Nirvana 483 BC, but actually the Buddha attained Nirvana 1864 BC.
Hmm.
So there is a chronological error of 1381 years. This is the chronological error. First, we have to correct it. Then, based on that, when you reconcile the Shakaira, then the Aihole inscription has the Mahabharata date. Clearly mentions Bharata Ahavadita is giving the Mahabharata date. Because, and
Hmm.
also it gives the Shaka date. If you reconcile the both, the date given, because we need not, that inscriptions can't be rewritten, they are the original documents.
Yes.
The day it wasn't written, even till date the same, because literature, what happens, you may have copied over a time, few generation you have written on paper or on bhojapatra. After 300 400 years you have to rewrite it, generation to generation. Then finally the manuscript available today is not the original manuscript.
Yes.
It's
Hmm.
actually copied 10 times or 12 times. Okay. So possibly there may be some scribble errors or some errors possible. But the inscriptions are original. So
Yes.
that's why I give more importance to inscription evidence that clearly gives them the considering the Shakaira 583 BCE, Aihole inscription is indicating a date around 3162 BC.
I see.
Then I
Hmm.
started reconciling the same date along with the astronomical. So I never
Hmm.
fixed a Mahabharata date using the internal evidence. What happens? Sanskrit shlokas can be interpreted whatever the way you wish it, because Sanskrit has such flexibility. Due to this is the reason the people who are just attempting astronomically, they land up with the different dates, and the many people are confused. How can we reconcile if 10 astronomers are fixing the date in 10 different dates? Then
Hmm.
astronomy is not a solution. It's an interpretation problem.
Hmm.
So that's why I thought I'll take the only traditional evidence and the inscriptional evidence. Based on that, the date goes to 3162 BC. So my reconciliation is external and internal both. Based on that,
Hmm.
then I started reinterpreting the shlokas, because you may have to reinterpret the real meaning of that shloka sometime. So based on that, I have established 3162 BC. This is the Mahabharata date. Okay.
Hmm.
If we go beyond Mahabharata, how to establish a date? Because in our
Yes.
entire traditional chronology talks about yugas.
Hmm.
Like Mahabharata war took place some at the end of Dwapara Yuga,
Yes.
and just Yuga commenced. Okay, and
Yes.
Kali Yuga date is very much available in our text, as well as we can easily reconcile the Kali Yuga. Hundreds and thousands of inscriptions are available referring to Kali Yuga date and everything. Okay. So
Hmm.
somewhere 32nd century BC only you can fix the end of the Dwapara Yuga and other. Now the
Hmm.
problem is how to fix the date of Treta Yuga.
Yes.
When Sri Rama was born, Ramayana events took place. And going beyond that, the Vedic era, what is the evidence? So what I
Mhm.
did, I just made a documentary. I may be releasing on 28th February on National Science Day. That
Mhm.
Mayasura Surya Siddhanta. This Mayasura Surya Siddhanta, it is clearly written that he is writing Surya Siddhanta at the end of Krita Yuga.
Okay.
Okay, 28th
Mhm.
Krita Yuga. So if I fix the date, I will get the beginning of Treta Yuga.
Yes.
Is correct? Okay.
Yes.
Once you
Mhm.
select the so first I have to fix the date of Surya Siddhanta. When I have investigated into Surya Siddhanta, he is referring to one rarest conjunction. He says that Asmin Krita Yuga Sante Sarve Madhya Gata Graha Meshadau. So he's saying that in the first degree of Aries, all planets were in the conjunction, and that was then a new moon day of Chaitra month.
I see.
Now there is a 360 degree. The sun is
Mhm.
moving 360 degree. So every five planet conjunction is possible, and even sun and moon maybe once in a 500 or 600 years or 400 years.
Mhm.
In a 10, 15,000 of thousands of years, you may have a conjunctions of 30 or maybe 40 conjunctions in
Okay.
last
Mhm.
15,000 years. I'm not going into deep into ice age, because in the ice age, because if you see the sea level rise also, it starts somewhere
Mhm.
16,000 BC onwards. Prior to that,
Mhm.
sea level was constant. In the ice age, rain is impossible.
Yes.
If it's not rain, the civilizational evolution is almost extremely difficult.
Yes.
So any agrarian society can flourish only when the rains are regular.
Yes.
So in India, southwest monsoon became regular only 16,000 BC or 15,000 BC, around that.
Mhm.
Even our astronomical evidence also, my evidence also suggests the same date. It goes to maximum 16,000 BC. So
Mhm.
somewhere 16 to 17,000 BCE in India, southwest monsoon became regular.
Yes.
Okay, so I checked only
Mhm.
up to that. I didn't go beyond that. When I
Yes.
checked this
Mhm.
16,000 BC to another 12 and 18,000 years, under 18,000 years, even you take two or three conjunction in particular year, maximum 50 conjunctions.
Mhm.
When you investigate into five, only one conjunction meets perfectly the what description given in Surya Siddhanta, and that leads to an absolute date, that is the 22nd February 6778 BC.
Mhm.
Okay,
Okay.
and after 1 year, Krita Yuga ended and Treta Yuga started.
Mhm.
And
Okay.
we have
Mhm.
our Saptarshi calendar also starts from 6777 BC onwards. So this
Mhm.
actually reconciles the entire traditional chronology, that till Surya Siddhanta we had only 5 year Yuga or 20-year Chatur Yuga. When Surya Siddhanta was introduced, we started following the Jupiter cycle, the 12 year. ये 12 वर्ष का जो कुंभ मेला होता है, ये वहां से
Mhm.
स्टार्ट होता है. Then
Okay.
we
Okay.
started
Mhm.
following the Jovian cycle, not the normal calendar year cycle of 5 years or 20 years.
I see.
When I started the Jovian cycle, 12 is a not a even number for a calendar for
Mhm.
reconciling the lunisolar calendar. They needed a
Mhm.
bigger cycle, so they take 1200 years. Now they say, okay, a Yuga length should have been 1200 years.
Okay.
This
Mhm.
was the reason the Treta Yuga had 1200 years, and Ramayana took place in the last century of that's 1200 years of Treta Yuga. So I
Mhm.
fixed the Treta Yuga from 6777 to 5577. So the last century, that is the 5677 to 5577, is the last century of Ramayana. Now, this we
Okay.
can
Mhm.
reconcile with the sea level simulations also, because Sri Lanka, the Ramasetu, the area was above the sea level only if you go back to 6000 BC onwards.
Mhm.
Actually, Sri Lanka was well connected with India up to 7000 BC or 6000 BC.
Right. Yes.
The area of Ramasetu was started submerging during the Ramayana era, or 200 years, 300 years. So
I see.
during the high tide, a major portion of the Ramasetu area used to submerge.
Okay.
Now, Ramayana era, since you are invading into the an enemy's country, who will give you the logistics support? No one.
Yeah.
You
No
don't
one.
have any relatives there, or somebody will support you, your entire army. So, and the logistics support you can only get from the Rameshwaram.
Mhm.
So, it was a strategic need to construct a Ramasetu, a Nala
Mhm.
Setu there. So, what they did, since they said that during the low tide, 90% of the area is not submerged, only high tide it is getting submerged. They just filled up the land and raised the land level by 1 meter or 1.5 meter. So
Mhm.
this was the Setu construction, not anything like any somebody erected a pillars and then with the concrete they constructed some kind of a bridge all
Mhm.
over it. Nothing. They just filled the land and raised the land level. This is the reason Ramayana,
Mhm.
the all entire Vanar Sena brought the even trees, even the rocks and the new all whatever is naturally available. They just filled up and then raised the land level.
Mhm.
So this is how they made land connectivity between Sri Lanka and Rameshwaram. First
Right.
priority was
Mhm.
because you are invading there, you need logistic support. In a war, you may have to take a one back step. Then you must
Yes.
have an escape route to
Yes.
attack again. So that's why they needed a Setu. That was very much needed at that time, because that time sea level was almost at that level, and presently it is around 10 meter above. So the sea level rose
Right.
7 8 meters. So even you simulate it, it goes to somewhere sixth millennium only. You cannot go beyond that because Sri Lanka was not an island. There was no need to build any Setu there. You easily walk into Sri Lanka.
Right. Right.
So
Mhm.
Ramayana cannot be there. So this is how you can reconcile both internal evidence, astronomical evidence, as well as the scientific evidence of sea level simulation and others.
Ceylon.
So
Mhm.
this perfectly establishes our Laukika Sanskrit, because Ramayana was written in Laukika Sanskrit. This was the reason why Valmiki was called as the Adi Kavi. Even
Mhm.
Vedas also written in Kavya. Vedas also a Kavya and written in verse only. Why Vedas were not called as a Adi Kavya?
Mhm.
Because in Lokik Sanskrit, somebody wrote a literature for the first time was the Valmiki.
I see.
So during that period, beginning of Treta Yuga was almost beginning of Lokik Sanskrit. So all
Mhm.
texts written Vedic or post-Vedic Sanskrit has to be dated prior to that. This is called
Mhm.
absolute linguistic evidence.
Mhm.
Then if you investigate into that, then Ashwini Nakshatra, because presently we start our Nakshatra list of 27, starting from Mesha Rashi, and Ashwini is the first Nakshatra.
Mhm.
And same scheme has been followed by Surya Siddhanta. So then
Okay.
you just go back to 540 years backward, 7322. At that time, Ashwini was at winter solstice shifted to Ashwini Nakshatra.
Mhm.
This is how why I even started when our Surya Siddhanta went to the West. Why before the advent of Christianity or that Christian religion, they followed Mithraism. They used to
Mithraism. Yes.
worship sun god, and winter
Mhm.
solstice used to be the birthday of the sun. Why?
Mhm.
Because our Surya Siddhanta, when that was transmitted to the Persians, they started gradually worshipping the sun. And at that times, the winter solstice used to occur in the beginning of the year, or Chaitra Shukla Pratipada. This was the
Mhm.
reason it was considered it was the birthday of the sun.
Mhm.
So these are the you can collateral evidences where you can establish that how our Surya Siddhanta when transmitted to the this even Persians also Greeks also they also refer to the same conjunction mentioned in Surya Siddhanta.
I see.
So this is the connectivity how Indian knowledge transmitted or out of India migrations
Yeah.
led to
Yes.
introduction of Indian Surya Siddhanta in the West. And not only that, even Al-Biruni, he mentioned the person who mentioned about this conjunction. Al-Biruni says this guy has taken this information from Indian sources.
Yes. Right.
It is crystal clear that Indian
Yeah.
Westerners said, no, 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 this conjunction actually somebody observed in the West, and then this may be an argument. So we have to
Yeah. Yeah.
have an evidence to that whether who observed it.
Yes.
It's actually because we not only maybe give the complete astronomical calculations also, that was the beginning of the astrology also, because prior to that, planets were not part of the calendrical calculations.
Mhm.
After Surya Siddhanta, planetary calculations became integral part of Indian astronomy. This is how the
Mhm.
Indian astrology even evolved further. And same epoch has been considered as the era of astrology, astrological era by Persians as well as the Greeks.
Right.
Now, if you go Ashwini, then you have to simply go back to Atharva Veda refers to list of Kritika.
Mhm.
ओके, तो अश्विनी से पीछे आपको 2000 साल पीछे जाना पड़ेगा टू फाइंड ए कृतिका डेट, बिकॉज प्रायर every 1000 years that solstice or equinox shift one nakshatra means 13.2 degrees. Sun
Ah.
precession is exactly 13.2 degrees in 1000 years. So
Mhm.
7300 BCE was the winter solstice shifted to Ashwini. Then
Mhm.
you have to start Bharani, almost 8,300 years. Another 1,000 years back, somewhere 9,200 BCE. At that time, Kritika, winter solstice shifted to Kritika. This is the
Mhm.
reason Atharva Veda's Nakshatra Sukta is referring to list of Kritikadi Nakshatra. He is not giving the list starting from Ashwini. Atharva Veda is giving
Mhm.
the list of Nakshatra starting from Kritika. So this is how Atharva Veda's Nakshatra Sukta can be dated, whether a rishi has recompiled or written originally, but that is referring to Kritika. So somebody living after 9200 BC only written, but he has to be dated prior to 8000 BC, because by the time the winter solstice shifted to Bharani. A person
Mhm.
living after 8000 B, 8300, he will not say that Kritika is the first nakshatra.
Mhm.
So 9200 BC. Then we have a references of shifting of solstice or that Rohini also. So then you have to go back to another 1000 years, somewhere 10,200 BCA. This was the time when winter solstice shifted to Rohini. And we
Mhm.
have a story of Daksha. He married all 27 daughters to the Chandra. And
Mhm.
Mrigashira was the Prajapati, Daksha. So this is how
Mhm.
28 nakshatra list was starting from Mrigashira.
Mhm.
Like Balganga Tilak wrote a book on Orion. This Orion story is actually
Mhm.
because Indian list of nakshatras were first time finalized starting from Mrigashira.
Okay.
Then it has been revised to Rohini list, again revised to Kritikadi list, then revised to Ashwini, then we stopped it. No, 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 you need not revise it's actually every 1000 you keep on revising, that will lead to a problem. Then they
Yeah.
come out of a different scheme. From the 7300 BC, they removed one nakshatra, because you can, if you divide 360 degree by 28, you will have a fractional values. If you
Yes.
divide it by 27, then you will not have a fractional issue, as well as you can easily reconcile the lunar motion also. Lunar motion also the is not 27.32 or 35. It's not 28. So that
Mhm.
27.35 is closer to 27, not that 360
Mhm.
degree motion of lunar motion is 27.3 days something.
Okay.
So this is how Indians finalized 27 nakshatra list around 7300 BC. Prior to that, Indians followed 28 nakshatra list.
Mhm.
And Mrigashira goes back to 11,200 BC.
Okay.
Now, when I reconcile the same date from the Tamil history has a, I can say, some kind of a so-called secular chronology. They
Oh.
simply
Okay.
counted the year, saying that from Agastya to when Ten Madurai, the ancient Madurai city was submerged by sea after
Mhm.
4,400 years. Then from when that was submerged, Kavatapuram became the capital city of Pandyas. Now
Mhm.
that submerged after 3,700 years later during the Mahabharata era. From Mahabharata, another 1,800 850 years is the third Sangam era. Total 10,000 years. When you
Okay.
add on this, correcting that Buddha chronology 1300 years, because modern historians date third Sangam somewhere first century, then if you add up 10,000, it goes to maximum 10,000 BC. But if you correct this
Okay.
1200, 1300 years, then 11,300 years, this was the time of Agastya. And he was
Mhm.
also contemporary of Daksha, Shiva. They all existed at that time. Later, they became they attained the status of divine personalities slowly,
Mhm.
because we
Mhm.
started worshipping our own historical personalities who contributed a lot to our society.
Yes.
So this is
Yes.
how Daksha, Shiva, and they, at the same time, the way Rig Veda, even Agastya wrote few suktas of Rig Veda.
Yes. Mhm.
Now you will get a very accurate date, somewhere 11,500 to 10,500. This within 1,000 years, the entire Rig Veda was compiled. Atharva Veda was
Right.
finally compiled somewhere 9,200 BC. This is the
Mhm.
timeline. But even Rigvedikira is that beginning of our historical? No, because even that we are referring to Vishwamitra. Even Indra became a god. All Vedic gods
Mhm.
were also once upon a time a historical personality. The
No
so-called
doubt about it.
Adityas, Rishi Aditya, now you have to trace back their history. So then what
Mhm.
I did, I just gone, there is a reference in Mahabharata that Vishwamitra disputed with the Vasishtha, and he corrected the nakshatra starting from Shravana.
Mhm.
Not only that, Ashwini Suktas as Rigvedas is referring to kind of a equinox occurring at Ashwini Nakshatra. And all
Mhm.
Vedas, probably if you have read Rigveda mantras, Jivema Sharada Shatam, there are hundreds of references in Vedic literature. They always refer to Sharad as the beginning of the new year
Mhm.
and synonymous to a year. It means a calendar beginning from the autumnal equinox was invoked during the early Vedic period. So when you
Okay.
just calculate it, it goes back to somewhere 13,500 BCE. At that time, autumnal equinox used to occur at Ashwini Nakshatra.
I see.
Okay. So at
Mhm.
that time, Vishwamitra and the Vasishtha existed. They were in the court of the Trishanku
Mhm.
story. And the same Vishwamitra, he had a relationship with Menaka and had a
Mhm.
daughter called Shakuntala, and Dushyanta
Mhm.
married. Bharata was born, and Bharata was coronated by a great Vedic rishi called Dirghatamas.
Mhm.
This, the Bharata, we are all Bharatiyas. Why?
Yes.
We are all descendant
Yes.
of that great Bharata. That great Bharata has
Mhm.
to be dated somewhere 13,500 BC, 1500 and 500, 15,500 years before from today.
Hmm.
Prior to that, there is another 1,000 years to date Swayambhu Manu and Brahma. Brahma was not a creator, he was the first historical person known in our history.
Mhm.
So then we thought that we named him after a creator.
Right.
But Brahma was also probably a historic person at that time. He had a son called Swayambhu Manu, and even Saptarshis were his either sons or his disciples or whatever we call it. This is how our tradition starts off, that seven rishis and the Brahma, Swayambhu Manu. And our solar dynasties and lunar dynasties also born out of the same rishi culture. That's why every Indian had the same Gotra before the arrival of Britishers. Now we all forgotten what Gotra we have. Every
I
Indian
see.
had a Gotra. A person, if he had no Gotra, no knowledge of his lineage, he will be a Mlecha.
Mhm.
This is the reason why Western side was all Mlechas, because they all forgotten. They used to mix up with the other Westerners. That's why we generally avoided mixing up with the Western side. This is the reason when Saraswati River dried up, even Rigvedic period, there was a different course of Saraswati that shifted
Mhm.
to westward. Then the same Videha Madhava and Gautama Rahugana, they migrated from Rajasthan to the Mithila and they set up their Videha kingdom. This is how Videha Janapada came into existence. And same
I see.
Videha became Janaka. Janaka's daughter Sita married Rama during the Ramayana era. So
Mhm.
this is how our chronological history goes back to somewhere 16,000 years backward. Means somewhere
Mhm.
14,500 BC must be the beginning of historical chronology. Apart from that, we had probably some 1,000 years or 1,500 years of pre-Vedic history also,
Mhm.
because the Brahma became so prominent because he started attaching the astronomical observations to calendrical. An agrarian
Mhm.
society should know when summer solstice occurs, because in the North India, a Saraswati River region, the even today also the rain start, because the rainy season starts when summer solstice occurs. even
Right.
today. Somewhere 22nd, 23rd June is the time of the summer solstice. So initially the calendar was Varsha Ritu to Varsha Ritu. This is the reason
I
why
see.
we called Varsh. एक वर्ष हो गया, दो
Varsh.
वर्ष हो गया, क्यों कहते हैं? Because traditionally we followed a Varsh from Varsha to Varsha, from rainy season to rainy season. But
Right.
it was Vasishtha who said that no solstices you should not, because there was a dispute between. After 1,000 years, a nakshatra shifted. During the Brahma's time, the summer solstice used to occur at Dhanishta. During the time of Vishwamitra, the same summer solstice used to occur at Shravana nakshatra. This was the reason why he revised. Since there was a dispute between the Vasishtha and Vishwamitra, Vasishtha did more penance and then he come out of a new theory. No, we must start a calendar from the equinox. So he selected autumnal equinox. At that time, autumnal equinox was more perfect than the vernal equinox. So
Right.
from that time, Ashwini nakshatra, that autumnal equinox used to correct Ashwini nakshatra. This was the reason the numerous Ashwini suktas in Rigveda.
I see.
Slowly, that Sharad Ritu calendar started shifting by the later Vedic period. Then we have evolved a calendar of Magha Shukla, the calendar of Vedanga Jyotisha. Then during the Surya Siddhanta, we said, no, let's have a Chaitra Shukladi. And even because Vedic era also, they followed the Chaitra, because during the autumnal equinox, at that time, Chaitra month used to be somewhere closer to Sharad Ritu. Today, it is almost closer to Vasanta Ritu. This is the difference. This happens due to precession. Seasonal calendar also shifts. So
Right. So
this
this
is
is
entire
so.
our. These are the very scientific evidence. You just follow how our astronomy evolved from Vedic era to. You will get the complete chronological footprints from our literature. Then reconcile with the astronomical evidences. So that's why we must work on complete chronology. We should not attempt on only any particular text in an isolation. Then we'll land up giving a chronology in bits and pieces, and then there would be a lot of discontinuity. Once there is a discontinuity, it's a very weak argument to present that.
So this
We
entire
are,
yeah, please go ahead.
no, what I'm saying, we are the continuous civilization from Vedic era,
Yes, yes,
Rigvedic till date. So we had
yes.
some continuous traditions also. We had this astronomical tradition. Just we have to. I always say that we have to just to understand how our Yuga chronology has been evolved. Initially, Vedic era, Yuga was 5-year Yuga. Why? They needed to only intercalation reason. They needed a 20-year Chatur Yuga to adjust Ardhamasa. But then when they understood that no, this way we can't correct the error in the calendrical calculations, it is better to follow Jupiter cycle to have a correct intercalation. But the problem is when you are dealing with the fractions. Why fractions? In a year there are not 365 days, 365 point few hours. You can't adjust few hours in the calendar.
Yeah.
Modern Gregorian calendar says I don't bother about moon or sun. Somehow I reconcile 365.25 days. Every 4 years I insert a day, or 100 years I don't insert, or whatever you do it, and somehow I'm reconciling. My calendar is perfect. But
Yeah.
these ignorant people don't know, without the moon and the solar cycle, how they are going to fix the Easter date that is dependent on the vernal equinox and the full moon. This was the reason always there was a conflict in all their councils. Initially they followed Jewish calendar. They had a hatred with the Jewish. Then they said no, we will not follow Jewish calendar, because they have to follow one lunisolar calendar to have a date in the Julian calendar. Otherwise it was impossible to give a date for the Easter. Then there's okay, let's follow Greek, and the Greeks and Syrians also had a lot of conflicts and animosity between them. Then actually the Syrians were traditionally following the Indian calendar. They followed Shaka calendar and they had a perfect date for the Easter. They had no problem. So-called Dark Ages were actually during Dark Ages they were following the Indian calendar. So then 13, 14, they started just exploring that why we are following first AD as the sheet anchor for the Easter. Then somebody, our God has incarnated. This is how Jesus' date has been fixed in the first AD by the James Husserl. Not only first AD, still they were confused. First AD, then you have to have a star of Bethlehem. There was no star of Bethlehem, means some kind of a conjunction of two planets that appeared as a big star.
Mhm.
So no conjunction. They said okay, fourth BC. Then somebody given seventh BC. But even you shift 4 or 7 years, then entire chronology has to be shifted. But they didn't do.
Mhm.
They didn't do, because if you do it, there is a huge problem. So modern chronologists simply follow first AD, though they are not able to independently. It is impossible to verify why first AD is the sheet anchor of world chronology. Why we
Mhm.
are following last 300 400 years first AD as a sheet anchor of world chronology. No question, nobody ever investigated till date, because they are the faithful historians in the European. They never
Mhm.
doubted that first AD can be a wrong sheet anchor. A sheet anchor must stand its own.
Yes.
Is there any evidence to say, forget about the Augustus or later event? Tell me what is the independently verifiable evidence to establish the epoch of first study? Nothing. No article exists
Nothing.
in the entire academia. And
Mhm.
moreover, it's a pity that in and all universities in the world have the history departments, but not a single department for the chronology, where the chronology is the basic science for the all, not only history, linguistics, even archaeogenetics, even for the carbon dating, all those methodologies. You need a established chronology first. Like mathematics is the basic science for the physics
Mhm.
and all physical sciences. So this is the reason every university has their department of mathematics.
Yes.
But in the history, linguistics, all these departments exist. There is no department of chronology, where all these subjects are based on chronology. So there is
Mhm.
a need to establish a department of chronology. And if the what I'm saying, entire world chronology, if we recall Indian chronology, there are three errors. Even I challenged with the more than 1 crore rupees in a particular YouTube channel, our Sanjay Dikshit,
Mhm.
Jaipur dialogue, stating that I'm saying there are three errors in the modern chronology. First is
Mhm.
Shaka Shakanta, we just mixed up with, that is the 660 years, where the Buddha Mahavira contemporaries. No, there is a difference of 600 or 700 years between Buddha and Mahavira. Third,
Mhm.
Jesus was born in 660 BC, not first AD.
Mhm.
If we correct these three, then we can solve all chronological problems in the world. So these are
Right.
the three. What I'm saying, the model is okay. The way modern historians followed the chronology, they just fixed wrong epochs.
Yes.
You have to simply correct these three things, then you can easily reconcile the entire world chronology. You have to shift backward certain chronology. Even Egyptian chronology, when they do carbon dating, it gives 500 years older date than the way they fix it. But they can't just change one particular dynasty backward 500, and it is impossible, because in the literature there is a sequential chronology is
Sequential.
available.
Yes. Yes.
Not only that, almost before or almost contemporary or of 50 60 years later, Alexander, Manetho, an Egyptian historian born, he wrote the entire chronology, and he says that the first king, first dynasty, they call it Menes, the first king of that dynasty, he says he
Mhm.
lived around 6000 BC.
Mhm.
The Christian historians of somewhere 3rd 4th century, they simply looking at the biblical chronology, they said that nobody was born beyond 4000 BC, then how can you date somebody around 6000 BC? Then they say
Mhm.
no, the Menes had a lineage from the Sam. A Sam, they say Ham, and he was the son of
Mhm.
Noah, so he has to
Mhm.
be dated somewhere 3000 BC. So now you have eaten away 3000 years of chronology of Egypt. That was the most
Right.
Egypt and the Syrians were the most ancient civilizations in the West. Even
Mhm.
Greece also. And you have
Mhm.
no history beyond Achaemenid Empire. You simply said Trojan War was a mythical, the way Mahabharata was a mythical war. Similarly, Trojan War. When the archaeologists found Troy city, now they started, okay, probably something might have happened, but chronologically they are not able to reconcile the dates.
They're not
If
able to.
Trojan War
Yes.
existed prior to Trojan War, they're saying that prior to Trojan War, more than 5,000 years before Zoroaster was born, who wrote Avesta, but
Mhm.
it means Avesta was written somewhere 7000 BC as per the Greek literature.
Mhm.
And Greek literary sources, even the philosopher, great scholars like Plato and other, they are saying that Atlantis city was submerged around somewhere closer to 10,000 BCE. These Christian historians, they don't believe all these things. Everything is
Mhm.
mythical. if you go beyond 3000 BC, because the problem is the Bible. Because Bible is saying that 4000 BC is the date of creation. All scientists up to Newton, they started fixing the even time. Somewhere 9 o'clock in the morning, God has created. That creation ka time bhi hai unke. So these kind of a scientist, so-called scientist.
Hmm. Yes, yes.
This is the big problem. Entire world presently, all the subjects which
Hmm.
follow the chronology, nobody goes beyond 3000 BC. I don't know why such this kind of a selective blindness I have. I can't explain, but this is only due to the way the church used to be very dominate the academics somewhere 16th 17th century. At that time modern sciences also started evolving, so they just followed the chronology. Now we
What
have
needs to
to,
happen is we need to bring scientists into history, into the study of history, research of history. That's what needs to happen. Then
but
the
we
attitudes may change.
but we have to get rid of this western blind
Yes,
faith
yes.
also.
Yes,
This is the
yes.
blind faith that you have adopted first idea of the sheet anchor. Now you started
Hmm.
reconciling the entire world chronology. Prior to that, we never reconciled. India followed Indian chronology, Greeks followed their own chronology, Egypt followed their chronology. They have nothing to do with the Jesus.
Yeah.
Why should I reconcile my chronology based on the Jesus? You have done something mistake in the dating of Jesus. Correct that one first. My chronology
Correct. Yeah.
correctly says my from the 3500. According to that, wherever Alexander fits, I will put it and I will reconcile the Greek chronology.
Hmm, hmm, hmm.
Since we are touching the world chronology, we have no other option to reconcile the entire world chronology.
The whole
So
thing.
I'm
Yes.
simply saying that let
Hmm.
us try the world Western chronology up to Augustus without referring to first AD.
Yes. Yes.
So that's a challenge. So that challenge I have taken. I have wrote a book, The Origin of the Christian Era, Fact or Fiction. I have not accepted first AD as the sheet anchor. I have taken the Venus tablet as a sheet anchor because Venus tablet gives a pattern of heliacal rising and setting of Venus. Such
Hmm.
pattern can occur only once in 10,000 years. So that gives an absolute date.
Hmm.
Then you look into the traditional sources and fix the chronology. When I started doing this, and as well as the Sothic cycle of Egyptians followed Sothic calendar, starting almost 14,061 years, 60 years. Two cycles means almost 3,000 years. They had a continuous calendrical history, and every date can be reconciled.
Hmm.
So this is how when I reconciled this thing, I found that Augustus has to be dated somewhere 702 BC, and he and 42nd year comes around 660 BC. That was the year Jesus was born. A person was born. Certainly,
Yeah.
he was not born to a virgin. Certainly, he never resurrected. Okay, he may have been crucified or killed by the a Jewish rival. Possible, many things may happen, but rest everything has been mythologically. People started no, 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 he was born to a particular virgin, and then he
Hmm.
after 3 days he resurrected, and after 40 days he has gone to heaven. It happens when a person attains the divine status, then the mythology crops in. Same thing happened
Yeah.
when we started worshipping our own historical personalities. We just mythologized the historical events. That we have to simply, with the Nirakshira Viveka, we have to differentiate these mythological exaggerations and the history. Then you can easily reconcile the entire Indian chronology. That I have done with my all these three books.
Right. So one question: how long will the Kali Yuga last, based on the calculations of the yugas?
No, what is that? This Yuga? What is Yuga? It's not anything kind of an astronomical event or something.
Hmm.
Okay,
Hmm.
the Yuga was like a calendar, like 5 years.
Hmm.
Every 5 years you repeat the calendar.
Yeah.
Every 20 years you repeat it. Okay, so
Hmm.
then we initially, since the it was very short, we started calculating. Okay, how many yugas have been elapsed? So
Hmm.
in my lifetime, somewhere 50 or 70 or 80 or 100 yugas have been elapsed. Not 100, I can say 20. 20 yugas have been elapsed because 20 yugas would have been 100 years. Okay.
Hmm. Hmm.
This is the reason in Rig Veda it is mentioned that Dirghatama Mamateyo Jujurvan Dashame Yuge. He became old when he attained the 10th yuga of age. Means 5 into
Hmm.
50. When he attained the age of 50, unke baal safed ho gaye. That what is been mentioned
Hmm.
in Rig Veda. So this is of
Hmm.
50 years age. He had At that time, he attained the age of 50 years. So
Hmm.
this is how when you reconcile the Yuga, then when you started this 12 years cycle of Jupiter, then
Hmm.
we have enlarged up to 1200 years.
Yeah.
This was the reason Treta Yuga had only 1200 years. This is the first change in the duration.
Hmm.
Okay.
Hmm.
After that, what happened? We said 1200 into 4800 years. They wanted some kind of a multiples in hundreds, sorry, tens. Then 12
Tens.
into 10, 12,000. So
Hmm.
4800 is not fitting into the scheme. They what they did, Chatur Yuga, they increased up to 12,000. Okay, instead of
Hmm.
4800, they increased to 12,000 years, and then said no, we must have a differential duration, like a Krita Yuga should have a 4800 years, Treta Yuga should have a 3600 years, and the Dwapara Yuga will have a 2400, and the Kali Yuga will have only 1200 years.
Okay.
This was the reason why Dwapara Yuga had 2400 years, where the Treta Yuga had only 1200 years. So
Hmm.
at the end of Treta Yuga, we enlarged the Chatur Yuga from 4800 to 12,000 years, and we come
Hmm.
out of a different duration. But in the
Hmm.
midway, just before the Mahabharata war, what we did, we just multiplied the 12,000 by 360
Okay.
to have a bigger numbers. क्या होता है कि when you are calculating in fractions, if you take more bigger number, your accuracy increases.
Yes. Hmm.
So what they did, they just multiplied the 12,000 into 360. That's why the later astronomers, they said that a Chatur Yuga has a 43 lakhs 20,000 years, and one Yuga has a 4 lakhs 32. Now 1200 multiplied by 360, 4 lakhs 32,000 years. Since
Hmm.
the present Kali Yuga, before the beginning, we have enlarged the Kali Yuga size 1200 to 4 lakhs 32 years. So even though after 5,200 years later also we are saying still Kali Yuga is continuing.
I see. Hmm.
So what we need to do, we have to historical evolution. So the historical evolution of Yuga, you can't apply the Yuga lengths which have been evolved somewhere closer to Mahabharata or later Mahabharata. You can't impose the same Yuga length backwards. You
Hmm.
have to
Right.
simply investigate into the books. If you look at the Vedic or post-Vedic literature, there is no reference of lakhs and thousands of years or crores of years, nowhere. They are only referring
Right.
to 5 year yuga or something, Chatur Yuga. That's all.
Hmm.
They never
Hmm.
referred to thousands and lakhs and crores of years.
Hmm.
It's only later, like Manusmriti, which was written somewhere after Ramayana rather. He only first time he is talking about that he this 4,800 years of Krita Yuga, 3,600 years, because by the time differential duration has come up.
Right.
And
Hmm.
just before Mahabharata era, like Lata Deva wrote Surya Siddhanta and Aryabhata wrote the Aryabhatiyam. That time they are talking about the lakhs of years, like 43 lakhs 20,000 years. So by the
I
time
see.
Mahabharata era, our Yuga length has been spent. So we have to say
Hmm.
our historical timeline and how the Yuga lengths have been increased. If you reconcile it, you will perfectly find out the chronology. This is the one
Hmm.
way. Second, you can reconcile with the Tamil chronology. They have only just how many years elapsed, they have a counting from the Agastya to third Sangamira. And
That's it.
both
Right.
can be reconciled. And second, same Sangamira, second Sangamira, Kavatapuram was the capital of Pandyas. And Ramayana
Hmm.
is referring to Kavatapuram as Pandya's capital. It
I
means
see.
Ramayana era has to be dated only in the second Sangam era. So, as per
Hmm.
the chronological calculation, second Sangam started 6,800 BC to 3,100 BC. So, between
Hmm.
that, it means you can't date Ramayana beyond 6,800 BC as per the Tamil chronological framework. So this is
Hmm.
how the every literary evidence can be easily explained if you can understand how the yugas have been evolved, the length of yugas have been evolved astronomically, just because astronomers wanted an accurate calculation in the astronomy. They are not referring.
Right.
This was the reason in a later stage when Ramayana has been recompiled, then they started writing that Rama might have lived over 11,000 years. Shatavarsha Sahasrani, it is given in the Ramayana, because
Hmm.
when the person was updating, he is generally mentioning that Rama might have reigned up to 11,000 years. What I did, you just divide by 360, it will be almost 30 years or 32 years. So this was the length of the duration of the reign of Rama,
Hmm.
because he was almost 40 years old when he became the king of Ayodhya. Then you have to
Right.
32 years. So when your Yuga lengths have been increased, you have no other option to historical timelines. Also, you have to increase it accordingly. Then only you will
Right.
match the chronology. So they just increase the Rama's reign by another multiplying 360. That's why there's 11,000 years Rama might have ruled at that time. So these
Hmm.
things actually we have to understand that how the Yuga lengths in a later period after Gupta period when Puranas were updated, that time people started believing that our Chatur Yuga cycles of lakhs of years are actually the real chronology.
Hmm. Hmm. Right. Yes, I
This
get it. Hmm.
this was the problem when we
Right.
started believing that probably the lakhs of years and crores of years of the history we have. That is scientifically impossible.
Hmm.
So
So it's
when you
very clear that
investigate,
the
huh,
yeah, it's
yes.
very clear that our chronology, our history goes back to like 12, 13,000 years before today, 14,000 or so years before today. So what
14,000 BC,
14,000
14,500
BC?
BC. Huh.
Hmm. So 16,500 years before today.
Before today, I can say
Before
that
today.
almost because the Dhanishta nakshatra, that summer
Hmm.
solstice Dhanishta would be 1,000 years. So
Hmm.
15,000 to 14,000. So you can start in the
Hmm.
midway. So you're having an error of 250 years plus minus.
Right.
So from that day onwards, if you fix, you need another 1,000 years to fix the date of first Vishwamitra.
Hmm. Yes. Right.
Because Ramayana refers to 1,000 years between difference between Vishwamitra and
Hmm.
Brahma. So then
Hmm.
this is how I can exactly fix the date of Vasishta, Vishwamitra, Shakuntala, and then Bharata
Hmm.
Dushyanta. Dushyanta and then Bharata.
Hmm.
Dushyant and
Hmm.
Shakuntala, and they married. That was actually real history. It's not some fiction. In India, there was never a tradition of writing fiction. We
Yes.
always
Yes.
wrote our natakas, our sahitya, everything. It's only based on the
Hmm.
historical stories. Only little bit we
Right.
have poetically exaggerated or mythologically exaggerated. That's all.
Yes. Right.
There was no only purposely that Vishnu Sharma he wrote Panchatantra and Hitopadesha to teach the dumb students to some like a fables of the animals and others. But
Hmm.
he is clearly saying that I'm writing a fiction. But
Hmm.
in all natakas, all kavyas, all are based on historical stories.
Right. So this is
So
what happens when we don't treat our history as mythology. When we treat it as actual facts, then we can actually
yeah.
calculate everything. So what needs to happen in the Indian system? Because our historians, the established mainstream historians, they see everything as mythology, as fiction. So what does the government need to do to change this? Because this needs to be known. What you have just explained.
the problem is the government or those in the managing the ministries of these universities, HRD ministry or anything, they're giving too much importance to the doubting Thomases. A person has
Hmm.
no idea. You are simply respecting him since he is doubting. So you are thinking that you are not able to do the research.
Hmm.
Otherwise, everything is exists. It's only someone has to explore that what went wrong during the last 200 years.
Yes.
We had never any tradition that some Aryans कहीं बाहर से आके यहाँ पर बस के ऐसा कभी कभी नहीं था.
Yeah.
Or you think that your history had only hardly 3,000 years old? That was also. Even you just
Hmm.
follow the Tamilian chronology, that fellow is telling that Agastya lived somewhere 10,000 years before the when Thansagam era ended.
Hmm.
And forget about all this. Even we had a complete tradition from Mahabharata to till date 5,000 years. Why suddenly we have been wrapped into by 500 BC? Beyond that, we
Yes.
have no chronology at all. बुद्ध से आप पीछे जाएंगे तो कोई chronology है ही नहीं है. Then they everything they said that within everything happened. I don't know how such a vast literature can, and even these guys tell us that we were even illiterate. We never had a knowledge of the script also, and
Oh
we
yes.
generated the a library worth of literature. Illiterates created the literature. I don't know how this
Yes.
happens. So,
Right.
totally a wrong history being has been written during the 200 years, but you have to have a courage to challenge and change the chronology because it affects every country in the world.
Yes.
This is the problem. This is the reason nobody wants to touch the chronology because everybody wants only low hanging fruits and the easy job.
Easy job. Yes,
but
that's right.
you will never solve this problem. Even till date, chronological problems have been not solved by these doubting Thomases or faithful historians. We have to
Right.
be
Yes.
do the actually erase the entire blackboard and let us start from the scratch. Let us build the chronology.
Exactly.
Can be
Exactly.
done, but you must have the courage to do so and conviction to do so. If you want only very easy job, then you are not fit to do this job. That is with the
Agreed.
government to do it, but it's okay. As a fellow Indians, our job is to do it, that we are doing whatever the best we can do.
Absolutely.
It
Absolutely.
is then finally satyameva jayate.
Satyameva Jayati. Yes.
Yes.
Okay, sir. Thank you so much for a very, very interesting explanation of the work that you've done, and thank you for writing those books. I would urge everybody to take a look at the books, read them. So, thank you, sir. Very interesting, very fascinating, very enlightening discussion, and thank you for what you've done, and keep doing the work, the great work. Thank you.
Thank you, Abhijit ji, for inviting me, and it is a very wonderful interaction with you. Thank you.
Very nice. Thank you so much.